Welcome to Alabama Manufacturing Now, hosted by Alabama Technology Network, a podcast where we cover a wide array of challenges, solutions, and innovations for manufacturers.
We're your host, Whitney Barlow, Supplier Development Manager.
And I'm Paige Caulfield, Marketing and PR Manager.
Welcome back to Manufacturing Now. We are so excited to have today Mark Colson with Alabama Trucking Association. Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I am so glad you came up here. How about you start off telling us what your role is at Alabama Trucking Association and how long you've been there and kind of what is Alabama Trucking Association?
Thanks, Whitney. You know, since 1938, the Alabama Trucking Association has been really what I like to say is just setting the standard for safety, for performance for the trucking industry in Alabama. And that comes through a lot of different avenues from, participating in the regulatory environment, both advancing regulations that promote safety and make sense, but also making sure that we don't have onerous regulations that cause slowdowns in the industry and that don't really affect highway safety or performance for trucking companies. And so since that time through advocacy at the state level in D.C., working with great partners like the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, which is our enforcer, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that's under USDOT. They set a lot of the rules, safety regulations that we have to live by. And, we work collaboratively with those partners so that we can find real solutions to real things. And so we're problem solvers. Truckers are problem solvers at heart. And, we're made up of a lot of talented individuals. One thing I love about the trucking industry that attracted me to work for the Alabama Trucking Association as its president and CEO was it's a hyper-competitive business. So trucking companies are competitive with each other. They're allied members is what we call them. So truck dealers and insurance side and banking and all the companies and industries that support trucking, they're super competitive. But when it comes down to solving problems, everybody works together and is on the same team. It's much like a sports environment. And it's what attracted me to the industry. In addition to, I grew up changing truck tires for my family's tire business called Blowout Tire Company in Chilton County, Whitney, where you live in Clanton.
Yes.
We were in Maplesville that my grandfather started in the late 1950s. We drove by it today on the way up here, the old shop, so that's not there anymore. And my father, who took it over in the 70s, moved it. In the mid-2000s, we moved it to right outside of Clanton. But I like to say God has a sense of humor. I grew up changing truck tires, and now I'm working in the trucking industry.
Oh, that is so cool. I love that. And, the great thing about the trucking industry is there's not an interstate you drive on that you don't pass a truck. And then my brother is a truck driver, and one thing that he always taught me was that from anything you use, if it wasn't for a truck driver, you wouldn't have it. And so we are very grateful for that industry, and it is a very integral part of supply chain, which was why we asked you to come today as we're doing some work with supply chain. But before we get into that, tell me how, so ATN is part of the Alabama Community College System, and I kind of want everyone to understand how you have a partnership with both those entities and how they help you or help the Trucking Association out with maybe education or training or et cetera.
Well, I think first it's most important for people to understand that in Alabama, there are 130+ thousand individuals that work in the trucking industry. And I didn't know that before coming in this job. Yeah, to put it in perspective a little bit, in auto manufacturing, which we all love and ATN loves. We love it because we move all their stuff, right? So
right.
We make over 2 million automobiles in Alabama now. A lot of people outside or even from Alabama don't even understand the great impact. But just using that industry alone, there's about 48,000 individuals that work at the Tier 1 through Tier 3 suppliers and the OEMs in Alabama.
Oh, my God.
130,000 employees in trucking in Alabama. 35,000, almost 34,000 trucking companies. And the trucking companies that are members of ours, they're providing wonderful jobs and opportunities for individuals throughout the state, in every county, in every legislative district. And it's our job to help communicate that and help people understand because, like you said, when you're on the highway, you're on the road, people see trucks. Sometimes they don't know how to drive around trucks. We have a team of professional drivers that go to high schools and coach them on how to safely drive around trucks and on the career opportunities that are out there. They're called our road team captains. Yeah, and so few high school students now we find are offered the opportunity to take driver's ed. Most students don't. Less than 10% of Alabama high school students take driver's ed now. And it's an odd thing. But having great partners, like I said before, is extremely important for those 32,000 trucking companies in Alabama, 130,000 employees, and working with ATN and the Alabama Community College System has been one of those key partnerships. And so within the community college system for our industry, two in-demand job sectors are the professional driver, which you have to have your CDL, and diesel technicians. And there's many other job opportunities. I like to tell people who are looking for jobs and looking for jobs in general, that if you want to be a lawyer, come work in trucking. Yeah. Be a good lawyer, come work in trucking. If you want to be, if you want to be a CPA, come work in trucking. If you want to do supply chain, it takes a lot of people to support that driver out there on the road. The driver is the most important person, but the mechanics working on the truck, and everyone in between. And so they've got a team of people supporting them when they're out on the road, and that's critically important. So through the community college system, we've got 15 plus now CDL programs those are at the public institutions through the community college system.
I didn't know y'all had that many.
Yeah, well, and the system doesn't, and the 9 plus diesel tech programs throughout the community college system. And with the advent through the Innovation Center of the Skills for Success program, which we were an early adopter and promoter of with Chancellor Baker and funding from the Alabama legislature, we were the second or third program that the Skills for Success created as the whole goal there was to do rapid response skills training for non-accredited programs. So for CDL, that applies. And the whole trick there is, how do you take, existing institutions in the system that have great programs and let them, expand and evolve theirs. And then for schools and areas that didn't have programming, how can this, what Skills for Success program be a tool that they can maybe provide it in a way that wasn't provided for this type of workforce training. So that has been a recent success of a partnership with the system. I'll talk about a few others later when we talk about the future workforce, but that's just out of the gate. They have a number of training programs that are essential to our industry, and our whole goal as a state association that represents the trucking industry, as I have gotten to visit almost all of those programs and work with people at all of them, is we ask the question, how can we be a good partner? And it's different in different parts of the state.
So one thing that I did notice about the Skills for Success is if you've got a company that has a group of people that want to be trained for CDL, they'll come actually to the company as well, right? So it's not just necessarily having to go to a college campus or a community college campus and train, correct?
Yes, that's right. And I like to say it's a dynamic delivery versus a static delivery. As you're static, you have to come to this location at this time. And this is adult education. And one fact in trucking, which is staggering and something we're working very hard to address in Alabama, is nationally and in Alabama, the age of an entry-level professional driver is 38 years old.
What?
So, yeah. So it's not, and it's true. So for 20 years, the average age, obviously there's a range there. For 20 years since someone was 18, they did something else. And then one day said, I'm going to try being a professional driver. And there's a lot of reasons for that. 18 to 20-year-old cannot drive interstate. They can't cross state lines. Only until 2019, we and others advocated to allow 18 to 20-year-olds to earn their CDL and drive intrastate within state lines. Still sort of doesn't make sense, because you can drive from Mobile to Huntsville,
right,
intrastate, if you're 18 to 20, but you can't go from Mobile to Biloxi, which is a very short distance. So,
right.
But safety is important, and the thought is, the 18 to 20-year-old's not capable of operating a large truck. Well, that's just not how it works. It never was an 18 or 19-year-old going to be throwing the keys to a big truck by themselves and let them drive. Insurance doesn't allow that now. Insurance requirements are such that any entry-level driver is difficult to employ in the over-the-road trucking industry. But there are other job applications that can be a pathway to getting into our industry, whether it be through driving for a municipality or a county government or local delivery. And so they really need to get those first 2 years of experience if they want to be an over-the-road trucker, if they want to drive, over the road or even regionally. And so that's another misnomer in trucking. There's so many diverse types of driving jobs, professional driving jobs. And so, communicating that to the training programs, but also, the career coaches in high schools, and being able to communicate those job opportunities to, I believe, FFA, and I've gotten involved with the FFA Foundation in Alabama. There's now 30,000 Alabama high school students that are in FFA. That's agri-science, which is part of the career tech side. And so we believe, diesel tech, CDL has a role there as well. So there's a lot of different ways I think we can partner with folks like the community college system to, showcase those job opportunities, and solve problems. But the Skills for Success program has been one. It's still being adopted and it's evolving, and that's a good thing. But to your point of them showing up at a trucking company or any kind of company that needs their drivers to earn their CDL or employees for whatever reason, yeah, they can do that knowledge test and training virtually through the platform that they created. That's the Skills for Success, so that they can do that virtually. It's interactive, and then they can come and have a trainer come to that facility in their own equipment and earn their CDL,
better,
which is
so you can be familiar with
right.
it. Yeah. So ATN. Just a side note, I was state FFA president.
Yeah.
So
Which school? Which high school? Where'd you go?
Well, no, I was I went to Wetumpka.
You went to Wetumpka.
And then I was president there, and then I became state president for the FFA. It is one of my most favorite organizations. It is exactly where you need to be working. We've got a guy from my alma mater. He went all the way to nationals for a diesel mechanic.
Hey.
So
We sponsored the diesel mechanic competition, and the FFA convention was 2 weeks ago. So shout out to FFA.
It is a great organization. So ATN, part of what we're part of is the manufacturing extension partnership, and in that we were had the fortunate benefit to be part of the CHIPS Act, which was on supply chain. Was part of that was the supply chain, and it wasn't just on computer chips and basic technology. It was on the entire supply chain, and a lot of it came from COVID. And, y'all are an integral part of the supply chain, and that is a mild understatement of what that is. So I would like to know on your side, because we only hear it from our side, what are some legislative things? What are some issues to help with supply chain and its efficiency? Really with the concept of we have ports, we have the issues of companies buying from state-owned entities in foreign countries that aren't always most favorable to the United States. And then there's these issues there. And we all know that even if all that slows it up, the one that's going to catch it is the last one they see, which usually is your people, right? And that's who's coming in. And so I would love to hear what y'all are trying to do to help kind of, buffer that and make it grow and learn.
Sure, and it's a big topic. We could spend a lot of time, and I'm not necessarily an expert, but I'll shed a little perspective. When I think about the global supply chain, and I observe what we all lived through together during COVID, it's amazing to me how both resilient the supply chain is and how fragile it is.
Yes.
At the same time.
At the same time.
Even during COVID, stuff still got there. It was 6 months late, but it's still
it was there.
It's still, and if people really understood how components to anything in manufacturing or anything, the elements are how their raw materials will come together, where they come from, how they're put together, how those finished products are put together and cobbled together, and then moved to wherever they're distributed to, and then gotten to moved to their final destination. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. And so I do think COVID was interesting because I believe there's an acute awareness by the average consumer of how that works. And they're a little more educated on how those things work. And they've seen things like the port shut down in L.A. and the Suez Canal, now the bridge collapse up in Pennsylvania. And so, or Baltimore, excuse me. So all those, that's just an observation of mine about the supply chain of just how resilient it can be, but also how fragile it can be. And right now, today, there's a story about the union strikes at the ports, and Mobile is under threat of that as well. So in trucking, there are a number of issues that I think are very critical that are impacting the supply chain. And we are an essential link in the supply chain. We, in Alabama and nationally, 81% of communities depend solely on trucking for their freight movement. In Alabama, it's higher, it's 86%. And so, we are the primary mode of transportation for every community, and some 100% of the supply chain or the mode of transportation. So I'll zoom out. Nationally, there's some big things going on that people probably, if they're not in trucking or not in the supply chain, aren't paying attention to. One big one that is having long-term effects are just the environmental regulations that are happening at EPA, and especially in states like California with CARB, that's the California Air Regulatory Board.
Yes.
And so, EPA has been deferring to CARB, and they've set these EV, electric vehicle, and emission mandates, which we support, by the way, in trucking. We have had an incredible impact on the environment in trucking through partnerships with entities like EPA historically to get clean diesel on the road. Today, a diesel engine manufacturer 2010 or after emits only 2 to 3% emissions.
Wow.
People don't know that. Yeah. Now, if you're prior to that, the problem is only about 50% of the trucks on the road nationally operate that equipment. Yet we have an FET, a federal excise tax, on all new truck purchases. 12%. It was a World War I era tax to fund the war, and it never went away. So on top of all the other sales tax you pay an additional 12%, about $25,000 per truck, $30,000 per truck, on top of everything, all the other costs. So there's a distance. At the same time, we have all the subsidies going towards electric vehicles, but for commercial, and we're not against that. But for commercial motor vehicles, those applications just aren't there yet. The technology's just not there, especially for battery electric vehicles. And I could get into all that. But so EPA and CARB and other states like California have been issuing these mandates. Manufacturers are having to respond to that build trucks, and they don't make sense. When there is a path to a cleaner environment that does make sense, that we can live with, that is consumer driven, and I'm talking about the commercial trucking industry, not necessarily passenger vehicles, but we could spend the whole time on the challenges with electric vehicles, with how the elements that go into producing the batteries and charging infrastructure, the weight of a truck with the batteries, and reduces your payload, the range, basically. And so a lot of data to bear there, but I think people need to understand those decisions that are being made are going to impact operations and the cost of operations here.
Right.
It's because there's no universal standard, and it's not being driven by what's best for the environment. I can't tell you really what it's being driven by the way, but another big one in trucking for supply chain is truck parking. It's a huge problem. If you drive up and down the interstate and you see trucks parked on, exit ramps, that is not ideal. It's a huge challenge for us to recruit women, because women are wonderful professional drivers, by the way. Statistically safer than men. Sorry,
my husband will beg to differ.
Yeah. My wife is a wonderful driver, but she doesn't drive a truck though. But if you're a female and you're saying, well, I'm going to park in the side of the road, sleep in my truck, and use the bathroom in my truck, that's not a very good incentive to recruit female drivers to the industry, which are about 7 to 8% of drivers right now. And it's growing, and that's a good thing, because technology is adapting, the industry is adapting to support more female professional drivers. But truck parking is a significant problem in Alabama and in every state. It's dangerous for the driver. There's liability involved, and it's just not a way to attract people to the industry. So I have a meeting when I leave here on this, and so on how to address truck parking in Alabama. Through the infrastructure bill that passed Congress, there's dedicated funding to truck parking to some degree.
Okay.
But it actually opens up other pots of existing money through the Federal Highway Administration to be used for truck parking. It incentivizes public-private partnerships. But we are hopeful in the future with more infrastructure, with another infrastructure bill or appropriations bill, then in the Congress, they'll dedicate money to truck parking, because it is matter of fact, ALDOT, Alabama Department of Transportation updated their freight plan last year. And they interviewed a lot of local economic development groups. West Alabama is quoted in their report. Every single one they talked to, and they're not from the trucking industry, but every single one group they talked to listed truck parking as one of the major problems for freight mobility in their regions.
Of course,
Dothan, Birmingham.
Right.
So
those are called marshalling. Was that what's the term of, was there a term for truck parking? I'm trying to go way back in time with my life now. In prior life from ATN, I was an economic developer, and one of the things both in Mississippi and in Alabama that we have an issue with is truck parking, and that matters because if you've got 3 shifts running and things are moving out, you've got to have the trucks nearby, and the manufacturing facility can't always hold all those trucks that they need, and that becomes a major issue. I think outside for those that are listening that are just thinking, well, I mean, okay, so truck parking. No, that impacts more than just the concept. Like, there's a lot of different factors that go into that.
So the downtime at facilities is a big one. I know from the manufacturing side, that's a collaborative effort between trucking and the shippers, if you will.
Yep.
And so that downtime, that's money out of the pocket of the trucker. And so that's something that, it's gotten better, I think, since COVID, but there were a lot of challenges. There were times during COVID where, a truck driver would have to sit outside a facility 6 hours and they wouldn't let them use the restroom.
What?
Yeah, I mean, it's so, there were challenges. Those are being addressed. Also in truck parking, most people don't know there's a hours of service mandate. So they can only drive so many hours and they have to rest so many hours. Well, because of how those hours fall, you get to the end of your run and you might have, I'm going to park there. Well, you get there, the parking lot's full, sometimes even when you had a reservation. And so then you're stuck as a truck driver with, park somewhere illegally or drive over my hours. So it's a unfair situation this driver's being put in.
Yeah.
And so even when they've planned well. Cargo theft is another one, just to be real quick. You're going to hear more and more, read more and more about that. It's a major international problem of all modes of transportation, whether you're at a port or a trucker. And it is the FBI, all the different agencies, our national association, you're going to see more legislation. You're going to see a lot more conversation about cargo theft going forward. Huge problem in the country, and it's finally getting the credit it deserves. So we're collaborating on that. And I'll give you one real quick one. Just a common sense, just so hard. It's so hard to pass anything through the U.S. Congress in this political environment. But one is it's called the Security Screening Modernization Act. Essentially, there are like multiple credentials. If you have a manufacturing facility that has needs any type of security clearance, as a truck driver, you have to go through multiple agencies to get the same security clearance on different timelines. And it requires one's through Homeland Security, one's through the Department of Transportation. So this and every group, and the unions like it, the railroads like it, the truckers like it. Everybody likes this bill, but it's still hard to get two different government agencies just to align their credentialing systems for like TSA PreCheck and the other security clearances you need to get on a military base. And that affects a lot more people than folks realize, depending on, what you're moving. So that actually has an opportunity to pass this Congress and would be another, you talk about problems in the supply chain. That's a huge problem in the supply chain. So that would be a help. So just a few things to mention there. There's lots of others.
I think those are really good. See, we just look what we learned on this podcast. I feel like I need to set up like a bi-weekly meeting with Mark so that I can just learn all this stuff on legislation. You are a wealth of knowledge.
Well, we talked a little bit about some things that are wrong, but what are some initiatives that are being advocated to attract and retain skilled truck drivers and mechanics?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I alluded to it a little bit earlier, and one is that partnership through the community college system, through the training programs there. Another is that we started and through a careers program and a marketing effort to really just put a face on our industry in the state. And I'll mention one of our major challenges. One of our major challenges is some elements of the plaintiff's bar that advertise against our industry. If you look at the billboards, or I don't watch TV, but if you turn your TV on, there's ad after ad after ad that objectify the trucking industry. During COVID, when everybody ran out of toilet paper, you called the truckers to deliver the toilet paper, right? That's who's going to deliver for you. So that puts a brand on our image, and it's not reflective of the hardworking men and women like that drives for Ross Neely Trucking, who's my chairman, operator out of Birmingham that's been around. Yeah, and I mean I like to rep the chairman. So part of that is putting a face on it. I mean, there's a human behind that truck. So we identified these wonderful humans, wonderful people, men and women who work for these companies in Alabama, doing the real hard work, sacrificing for their families, providing for their families, and we try to tell their stories. And we've done that through a career site. We're going to be updating that. And the whole goal there was we identified through a lot of research populations of people who might be more probable to want to get into a trucking career based on things we'd identify as, whether they wanted to explore the country or they wanted to own their own business or, whatever that might be. And, how do we present these stories to them in a way that would say, oh, yeah, that is something that I look like her. Right. Felicia, who was a CNA and did CNA work and drives a flatbed and beautiful woman, cover of our magazine. She almost like she was a hired model. I joked with her when we gave her an award because she was one of the people and we had this close-up shot of her that was going to go on the cover of our magazine. And I told our team, I was like, we can't use that picture. And they were like, why not? Well, so because the headline was "The Real Faces of Alabama Trucking." She looks fake because she's so beautiful. And I told her that, and she liked that story, by the way. So we used a wider shot. But she, she got in this industry in her mid-20s. Now she owns her own truck. She's got this great story. And so there are other women out there that she could inspire by sharing that story. So that's what we wanted to do, and we're doing that. We want to expand it, and then also point people to the information they need to be successful. Like, this is what you need to know. Here's training opportunities in your area. Here's how to connect with the industry. And really, one of our biggest challenges in trucking, in my opinion, is to demystify the career pathway. It's more difficult for a lot of reasons than a lot of other other industries, whether you go to construction or manufacturing. So there are some, like in the military, if you want to go join the military, you know the exact steps.
Right.
And so the pathway in trucking is a little more difficult because of entry-level drivers. It's challenging because of insurance and getting that first job and getting those 2 years of experience. But there is a pathway there. I don't feel like we always do a great job communicating that. And also, we lose high school students. So, we say, so we find a 17-year-old that, is excited. Like, I love trucks. I want to learn how to drive a truck. Or I want to work on a truck. That's a little bit different. If they're an 18-year-old diesel mechanic, can make a lot of good money.
Yes, they
so,
can.
but we say, okay, come back to us when you're 21. Then you lose them. And there's a reason the average entry-level age is 38 years old. So telling those stories is the most important thing. Changing that image is one of the most important things. And then partnering with folks like the community college system, I think, is essential.
Good. So how can the government support workforce development programs specific to the trucking?
Well, I got a great one, and it's happening. So we just finished this week the second annual in partnership with the community college system. Shout out to Gary Weaver and his team and April, who works with him there. 2 years. Well, when we got into this work, I've been in this job 5 years. And, as I've toured the state, talked to the best and brightest in trucking, talked to the best and brightest in workforce development, try to figure this out, right? And there was no silver bullet. If there was a silver bullet, it would be easy. But one of the things we identified was these training programs are essential, but still, think back to some of the classes that y'all liked when you were in high school or college. What made it good? The professor, the teacher.
100%.
You have a great teacher, you're going to be successful.
Yes.
I remember I took a college class, Wisdom and Poetic Literature, Dr. Borders, and he made this the most, it was wonderful about the religion class. But he made it super interesting because he was such an effective teacher. So if you talk to any training program, they will tell you how hard it is to recruit a diesel tech instructor or a CDL instructor, diesel tech instructor especially. Because if they're talented, they're out making money.
Right.
And this is normally not a job that pays a lot,
Yeah.
paying what the...
No, that's right. And that's just because you're good at the profession doesn't mean you're good at coaching.
Amen.
And we've all had coaches like that in our life. So we took it as an industry, said we've got to support these training programs, and it's one of our responsibilities to help them nurture and coach their coaches, right? So they can go coach the future workforce.
Right.
So what I found out in almost every sector of education, be it pre-K, high school, elementary, post-secondary, the instructors, the teachers, whatever group it is, has a professional development organization that supports them.
Yes.
Elementary ed, coaches, school bus drivers.
They do.
Pick one. Special ed. And career coaches. They all have a conference. They all have a professional development. So all those 15 CDL programs, non-diesel tech programs, all the program leaders, their colleges do some stuff, but as a collective, they got no professional development support. And that's not anyone's fault, but it's just no one said we've got to coordinate these things. So the community college system was very supportive of that, but still starting something new, it's hard. So we did I told Gary and the folks at the system level and every college president that I would meet somewhere, I was like, hey, and everybody said, this is a great idea, I'm in. So we just had to figure out how to get it off the ground. So they did. But I said, I selfishly only want one thing out of it. One thing was to be able to look at each one of them and say, we love you and we support you.
Mm-hmm.
And how often, I learned this from our truck driving community because during COVID, hashtag Thank a Trucker became popular.
Yeah.
And I had professional drivers that had been driving for 20 plus years. I'd talk to and be like, I would say thank you. And they're like, thanks. And they would tell me some story of somebody at a rest stop telling them thanks. And they were like, man, I've been driving for 20 years, never had an accident, provided for my family, but I've never had somebody walk up to me and just say thank you.
Oh, that's heartwarming.
And so I just reminded me of how important it is to thank the people doing the real work, that are the hands-on doing the real work. So we had the first one last year. Second one was this week in Montgomery at Trenum. We had over 60 of the professionals that are in there. We helped put the program together, but Gary and his team did it all. But we need to make that even better. It needs to be a special effort to support the diesel tech instructors and program leaders and CDL instructors, at least through the community college system. There's private training programs out there too that do a great job. And so our commitment to it is we're in for whatever it takes to be successful. Yeah. So just one single tangible way that we can partner with the government to do something that's going to have a direct benefit. And really, the members that we represent aren't the direct beneficiary of those programs. Some are, but it's so hard to hire entry-level jobs. So we got to help also identify where they're going to get their first jobs.
Right.
And you talk these programs, they're full, but they still need equipment. They need resources. And so, again, our goal is to just be a good partner.
Was the first one y'all had? Was that the one?
At Problem.
So ATN did the leadership part. We did the
right. You did the knot.
Knot thing where you get together and have to try to get it out. And then we did the pipes. The LMD team did all of that. Where you drop the ball in the pipe. Yeah, that one was pretty easy. The knot was not so much. My team did not succeed.
I'm never good on the pipe thing.
We did well on the pipes, but we won on the pipes.
I've got like vivid memories of The Office. If you watch The Office, their team building episode. One of the other ways you mentioned the government, what they can do to be helpful. I will say, on that lawsuit abuse front, I mean, there are practices at play in the litigation environment that, look, if someone's been injured, whatever the case is, that's what the justice system is for, to deliver justice. It's not there for profiteering and driving up the cost of litigation. Mm-hmm. And there are certain things that are going on in that environment that have tipped the scales out of balance, and they need to bring back in balance. No bad actor needs to be protected, but if you look at insurance costs across the board, you look at the effect that's having on the supply chain and the cost of operations, we put safety number one. We invest millions, nationally billions of dollars into safety as an industry. We want to set the standard high. And so the legislature in Alabama has the opportunity to address a number of those issues. That's a very difficult political thing to do.
It is.
But that conversation needs to be had. And I think that's a healthy thing to have those conversations. And so that started last year, and I expect that to continue into the future. So just another example of what can be done at the governmental level to support workforce development and the supply chain.
I think that one thing that everyone needs to understand, and the reason why we asked you to come on here, is that the supply chain is so integral, and everything that you have talked about today, that cost is carried down. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is coming to the consumer at the end of the day, because someone has to, for all of the increases and these things that are maybe abuse of the justice system, or issues where we need to be very conservative of the environment, but we're not being thoughtful and analytical and logical in the process of how to do that. All of those implementations that they put on with really what you feel like sometimes is not a lot of thought, that impacts the supply chain. Sure. And ultimately affects our manufacturers, which is who we work with. And then, of course, we're all sitting at this table, we're all consumers. Right. And when I order my Amazon, I expect one of your members and their team to get my package there within 12 hours. But that is the expectation of the consumer. And I think that we forgot that. In 2020, we remembered how important that industry is.
No more prime delivery.
No, there was no more prime, but you did hit on that, Mark, about how dependent this state is on truck driving when it comes to delivering goods back and forth. We do have other means of transportation, but some of that infrastructure is not either effective or financially feasible for companies, both commercial and industrial, to use. And so our reliance on this industry and understanding how to support this industry is very important for the supply chain.
That's right. And I mean, one of those issues that goes into that is infrastructure investment. The port expansion in Mobile is going to be huge for Alabama's economy, but we got to have infrastructure that supports that. All the modes of transportation are important. The intermodal, Montgomery Inland Port intermodal facility is going to be a potentially significant thing. But, there are a lot of challenges there. How do you pay for it? It's hard. Our organization has been, we like to say yes. We like to be a problem solver with whether it be government, how to fund the Mobile Bridge in Mobile, the Mobile River Bridge, that I-10 project. How to create revenues that allow these extremely necessary products that improve freight, mobility, and safety. Mm-hmm. And so we try to take a proactive approach to being a good partner It's difficult because, I mean, things cost money. And right now, things cost a lot of money. And I would say there is an extreme sensitivity within the business world, especially small business, but just the average consumer of inflation. They understand inflation, I think, better than we have in a long time. And but having a focus on infrastructure projects that are going to make the roads safer, relieve congestion, which costs money, because all those things, as the truck sits there, it's costing the trucker their money personally, and it's going to increase the cost for the end consumer across the board. That's why we try to raise awareness about the costs that are associated with lawsuit abuse, the costs that are associated with lack of infrastructure investment or congestion, the costs associated with tolling. And, in Alabama, it's not a big tolling state, but nationally, that's a big conversation. And, that is part of the conversation down in Mobile. I think they've thought through that pretty well. There's a lot of dynamics to that project. It's a very expensive project. But large in part, the way I like people to think about tolling is they think about it's like a user pays, which sounds good. But it's also it's primarily a way to finance debt.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly
because you're taking out all this debt, and you gotta create revenue to finance the debt, right? It is, when you actually look at the math, 10 cents, if you look at $10, it's $6 to $7 of that 10 could be used on financing the debt. That's not an efficient use of a way to finance debt. So, we try to raise awareness around those things because at the end of the day, yes, it affects our industry, but it affects the end consumer.
Yes, it does. So what do you think as partners, as we continue to grow, what do you think the future is for both your industry and how we can continue to evolve? I have thrown you a curveball. Can you continue to evolve both at the community college and the state? Just your thoughts, because one reason is because you are a wealth of knowledge, and I think your insight of how the growth of this industry is, both the supply chain and how you're partnering with all of these different agencies and groups. So the conversation is getting started. The conversations are being had, conversations that are probably not always easy, but are crucial to the growth of Alabama. So what do you see with both the association and the industry and your continued work with ATN and community college?
Well, I think the acute awareness of just the trucking industry being so significant for our workforce development, economy, economic development. We're not necessarily a subsidized industry. We don't, receive economic incentives. I'm glad those that do, because we were a beneficiary of that economic activity. But we sometimes are not thought of until the last minute.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So, that's part of those partnerships that we're talking about, part of the awareness, and that's on us to be at those tables. And so, I'm surprised you haven't asked me about autonomous trucks or electric trucks. So the future of the industry and the future of those relationships, I'm very bullish on technological innovation. It's disruptive at first, but the thought that nobody's going to be driving all these trucks in the next few years is just not the case. The professional driver is going to be extremely necessary for the foreseeable future. There are applications where, and by the way, if we're talking about autonomous technology and autonomous vehicles for commercial trucks, but for your passenger vehicles too, you can't think of it as a light switch you turn on and off.
No.
You have to think of it as an evolution, as a step.
Yeah.
So right now, there's 5 steps of autonomy. Your cars have automatic braking systems and lane assist and park assist and all these things. Those are autonomous technologies. Yeah, the most extreme is you don't touch anything and it drives itself, which, that technology exists today, both for commercial trucks and for passenger vehicles. And I know it's scary, but over time, I really do think that type of technology is going to be a net beneficiary to the professional drivers. There'll be applications for it that, do the worst jobs that people don't necessarily want to do. And same goes for alternative fuels. If the government would not force a one-size-fits-all mandate on these things, there are a lot of innovations out there that can make sense. It's got to make sense in the markets. It's got to make sense for the consumers. But if the goal is for alternative fuel vehicles is to reduce carbon emissions, okay, let that be the goal, and let the really talented, smart people out there figure out how we're going to get there, than saying, oh, it's got to look like this and it's got to look like that. So that's what's been happening. So I really think the next decade, 5 years, but especially 10 years in the supply chain world and the trucking world is going to be disruptive. It's going to change a lot, but it's also, I think, going to we've learned a lot about, the supply chain and their resiliency or lack of resiliency, especially throughout COVID. And so I think the standard that when I talk to some of the best and brightest in trucking that are doing things the right way, they got so many challenges, but they're still glass half full people. They're hopeful. They see the future. They know they have to be adaptive to change. So I'm hopeful is the answer to your question, that a lot of the changes that are going to occur are going to be a net positive. Certainly there'll be some challenges there.
Yeah, the autonomous could come into play where you help when fall in for the driver when they're out of hours or something like that. Like, there's great ways to come up with it. That's a big advanced manufacturing, and AI is a big thing in manufacturing, and it's disruptive. But for the companies that take it on and they go through the growth, it always ends up being a net positive. So thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate you coming to Paige. I bet you do too.
Absolutely.
I feel like we've learned a ton.
Tell everybody if there is a way to contact ATA if they have any questions about a trucking association, or if they just want to thank a truck driver.
First, go thank a truck driver. That's the first thing. But our website is probably the best, alabamatrucking.org. I'm on all the social media platforms at the AL Trucker, and so is our association. So you can find us there. I would also refer you to lawsuitfairness4al.com for more information on that effort. And just at the end of the day, I think when we get on the road, what I like to always encourage people to do is when you're driving around a truck, keep your distance, give them the right of way, stay safe, drive the speed limit, and let's all stay off our phones.
Okay, amen. Got it.
Well, again, we appreciate it, Mark, and we see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Paige. Thanks, Whitney.